Hello, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Entrepreneur Speaks podcast, the podcast where we uncover the journeys, lessons, challenges, and breakthroughs of entrepreneurs, leaders, innovators, and change makers from around the world. Today's conversation is one I'm excited about because I have the privilege of hosting two remarkable individuals, and I can confidently describe them as a true power couple in the world of leadership, strategy, and impact. I first met them during a season of uncertainty and transition in my own journey, and our conversations left a lasting impression on me. But perhaps that story is for another day. What does it truly take to build impact, grow revenue, lead with purpose, and remain resilient in a rapidly changing world? How do leaders move from complexity to ambiguity into clarity, alignment, and action? Today, we explore these questions and more in this conversation. Joining me is Dr. Esther Zeledon. She's a strategist, scientist, former diplomat, executive coach, best-selling author, TEDx speaker, and founder of Be.Act.Change and YourPitch. That should tell you she's a lady of many parts. Alongside her is Dr. Paul Rivera. He's also a strategic planner, an expert facilitator, national economist, and leadership coach known for guiding organizations through complex environments toward purpose-driven and sustainable impact. Dr. and Dr. Paul, welcome to the Entrepreneur Speaks. It's an absolute pleasure to have you both on the show.
Thank you so much. We're so honored to be here with you. This is, as you said, we met at a time when things were tough, and it's nice to be able to come here and talk about things that are so meaningful to us and so impactful to us, and to really try to share some of that with your audience. So we're grateful and we're honored.
All right. So let's go on with our conversation today. So before the titles and the achievements and the global experience, who were you growing up, or what experiences shaped who you are today?
I'll start, because if not, I'll take over the whole podcast.
Oh, man.
No. I think we should do it ladies first. So we'll start with you, Esther.
No. Okay. You guys all asked for it. So many things shape my path. So, I have a book, Creating Your Limitless Life, where I talk a lot about everything that happened to me. But I'm going to share, because there's so many stories, but I think I'm going to share two that are the most instrumental, okay? Because they kind of go on top of each other and shape everything I do now. The first one is, when I was 2 years old, I almost died. I was given 3 weeks to live. And my dad was unwilling to accept that as like the fate of my life. And so he played the lottery with my aunt in Nicaragua, and they won. And with that, they saved my life. And they used all the money to save me. And he never ever, they never threw in my face that all the money was used to save me. I just knew that was the story, and and I knew that was the sacrifice they made. Now, that was pivotal because it taught me about never giving up. And having this higher belief, you can, whatever you believe in the universe and things working out and challenges and in crises. So that's one piece. But then the second story is when I was 10, my dad was studying for his doctorate, right? So we left the war where we were refugees in the United States. Everything was going really bad in Nicaragua. We left the war, and he went to study. That was a way that we were able to get there. And when he was there, he was deep in his studies. He had only 1 year left, and they told him, we don't have any more funding for you. So he lost his PhD funding. My mom at that time was 7 months pregnant with my brother, and, he had a fourth child on his way. It was the middle of the school year. He had no idea this was going to happen, my family. And so he's like, okay. He's like, well, I have to go back to Nicaragua. I'm going to go work for 3 years. They were doing the reconstruction of the country. And we had to my mom sent my sister and I by ourselves cross country. And I remember us being like, well, okay, we've never flown. We don't know, other than immigrating. And my sister and I it was the first time we knew that this was going to be the rest of our lives, learning how to navigate things on our own. And we get to Miami. My mom lost her health insurance. She almost died giving birth. And then it started our struggle. From then on, we struggled financially, struggled in every possible way. Now, that experience, though, taught me, my dad was brilliant. He had a PhD. He was he had worked in government and the whole thing. And in that moment,
He actually worked for USAID.
yeah, yes.
Okay.
He was actually local staff, yeah. And so I was the legacy from USAID. But he couldn't in that moment articulate his value or articulate or advocate why he should keep his funding. He didn't even know that was an option. He was like, oh, I lost my funding. I need to go find another way to survive. And that's when I realized if you don't know how to communicate your value proposition, and advocate, it can make or break you. And so from there, those two experiences shaped my entire life, because then I realized, one, I had to change the fate of my dad because he changed my fate. And then so I became the high achiever, people pleaser, I'm going to fix it for my family type person. And the other thing was knowing your values. So while look, this goes full circle. So then I started helping everyone after that, from when I was like 10. So, I was then 12 and tutoring the kids that were 10 years old. And whether you were trying to get into a better school or a scholarship to a school or pay your tuition or, get into a job or find anything, I was always helping everybody along the way figure out how to get it, how to pitch themselves, how to advocate for themselves, everything. And so when people ask me now, how long have you been doing pitch practice and value proposition? I'm like, my entire life. That's right. So yeah, I was like, that's it. I got to help everyone with that. And then, so when I was able to get into a good college, Swarthmore College, got a scholarship, the whole thing, I got into the same PhD school as him, Berkeley. And the minute I got there, I pitched for my dad. I got him re-enrolled, even though he had been trying for 10 years. He couldn't do it. I got him re-enrolled that first week. Then I got his whole committee, did the whole process, and we graduated together. And that was the full circle. Yeah. And then since then, that's what I've helped people do, right? Whether it was in academia, whether it was with USAID, whether it was now with Be.Act.Change, I help people understand what they bring to the world, what's their value proposition, and not just understand it, but then communicate and position it and advocate with it so that we can then navigate the systems we need to navigate and propel and thrive. And so that's why I was like, I'm only going to share true stories.
Yeah,
Those
yeah,
are
yeah.
the two big ones that
Okay,
shaped my life.
okay,
Yeah.
that's very good. As we converse, we'll try and break a number of things you said down so that we would all appreciate it. Our audience would also appreciate it. Now let's hear from you, Dr. Paul.
Man, so my story is different, even though we have a lot of parallels. I grew up in a very interesting family. So I was born in the United States, but I am the child of immigrants, right? And so I grew up in a very immigrant feeling kind of a scenario, right? But I grew up really with my parents and my grandparents, who were very, very different people. My parents, how do I say? My grandparents were the hub of community. Everyone loved my grandparents. They created their own community. They accepted everyone. They loved everyone. And my parents are very different. My parents, they're so much more focused on safety and security and having money. And it was very fascinating growing up with them, because the idea of money itself was very important. And it was also very important not to spend the money and not to talk about money. Money is taboo, but yet everything is about money, right? Whereas my grandfather was the guy who, if he saw somebody who needed a shirt, he would take the shirt that he was wearing and give it to that person, right? So for him, anything that you had was about how can you bring joy to the world through that thing. And so I grew up in the middle of that. And so
on top of that, you grew up with multiple languages. I don't know if they know that.
No, yeah. So, I grew up in the United States, so English, but I only spoke English at school. So at home, everything was Spanish. And my grandparents and my mom are from the south of Mexico, where they speak Spanish, but they're also a very heavily Mayan speaking indigenous communities. Okay. We heard all of that on a regular basis. So it was a really, really rich cultural way to grow up. But it was interesting because one of the things that have shaped me have been at the intersection of those two things. So a lot of push and pull, right? And to the point where I realized where my values are. And my values were on the, give love to everyone and be who you are. The part about authenticity is really, really heavy in my story, because I grew up in that very working class, kind of a blue collar, work with your hands kind of a thing. And there was an expectation of what is a man and how does a man behave and things along those lines. And the truth is that, I'm married, I have children, I'm a man, but I love babies and I love to cook and, and I love art and all of these things, right? So there were times where I was faced with either expressing myself authentically or feeling cut off or disconnected from those who were supposed to be my circle.
Well, also, Paul, when I met Paul, he hadn't danced since he was 5 years old because
Whoa.
because of the situation where they how do you say emasculated, right? It was all about like toxic masculinity,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
boys don't dance, yeah, a lot of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And to this day, I remain a terrible dancer, but I'm much more willing to try it.
Oh yeah, it's good to try. I always say there's no formula when it comes to dancing. You move to the sound of music.
Yes, correct. I tell everyone, my dad says that the way that we dance is that if you've ever gone to the circus and if you've ever seen the bear riding the bicycle, that's how I dance.
All right.
No, he's a good dancer.
But anyway, it's been an interesting journey.
A lot of
Yeah.
I think if we had to summarize your childhood, it was a lot around your parents were a lot around fear and scarcity.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
I don't know, summarize your
Yeah, no, that's it. That's it. And the circle, the full circle of that is that on one side, it's a little bit unfortunate because I'm not that close to my family. We realize that I don't share the same values as my parents, right? And it's a little bit sad because they're the ones I think who you expect are going to be your biggest champions, your biggest supporters. And in their own way they are, but it's not in the ways that are valuable and matter to me, right? So, and at the same time, I realize that I am so much happier, calmer, less anxious because I've chosen to live my life in a way that is aligned with me, right? And that's sort of the full circle.
All right. All right. So you talked about something. One key thing stood out, the value of community. So I want us to talk about community and its importance. I was just discussing this with a friend just yesterday. The fact that we should always think about communal living. There's power in living a community and accepting community. A lot of people are very comfortable with living in silos and they think everything can be achieved on their own. How do the two of you, how do you see community? How valuable is community?
I think that's for you. You want to take that?
Well, I think Paul's story with his grandparents, right? They taught him the value of community. I mean, I think when Paul talks about his grandparents to me, I only met his grandpa and he died in community. Actually, we went to see him in Mexico and he was until the end of his life in his 90s, right?
Yeah.
Surrounded by people. We went to the house and it was full of people and full of life. And because he valued community and all the way till the end, through generosity, through community, through love, he was surrounded with love. And I think that was one of the nice things is because he was exactly who Paul had always told me he was, right? That is this grandpa, the house was so vibrant. But I think for us, it's a big part of my life. Again, my parents, because of the whole immigrant leaving war experience, when you leave a war driven country, I think one of the side effects, it was like part of my dissertation, is that it leads to people not trusting each other. And people being like, whose side are you? And don't trust your neighbor, which, political party and that division. I think Nicaragua has that history. It creates that sensation in that community. And it was one of the things growing up that I was like, man, this is so this needs to be different. And I remember doing my dissertation in Nicaragua where ex-combatants from different groups, they were starting to come together in community. So community means for us belonging, people coming together, people cheering you on your aspirations, people supporting you the way you want to be supported, lifting you up, showing that love and belonging and that space and just sharing life and things.
One of the things that I think is really important, I love words and I love the origin of words, right? So word community means to come together as one, right? And oftentimes we think that community has to be a certain kind of person or a certain group of people. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes we make, right? Your community can be anywhere. Your community can be anyone. And what I think people need to focus on is that commonality of values, that commonality of purpose. And that's something that transcends language and gender and country and all of that. So the bigger, I spend a lot of time when we talk about things, talking about what economists call big universe and small universe. And I think that so often our troubles, our problems, our anxieties are because we're focused on small universe thinking. The more you can expand to big universe thinking, you start to see possibilities that you never thought about. You start to see opportunities that you would have been blind to otherwise. And community is a big piece of that. We've seen it. Our community has turned out to be people that, had we been more closed off, we would never have reached out. We would never have seen, the fact that we're speaking to you, on the other side of the world today. That's a big piece of how it is that we build our community.
Yeah. And that's the thing. In this world now, it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be people in your necessary vicinity. I think for Paul and I, our community is worldwide, and we love that. We have community all the way in the Maldives to Dubai to Guatemala to here in we're in the Dominican Republic right now, to the US, to different cities, and
to Accra,
sometimes we
Ghana,
get
to Accra, Ghana.
yeah, and Ghana and like everywhere, and the UK. And what matters more is, do we have an alignment of the way we see the world and values and helping and meaningful work, right? And like that is so beautiful, and is so beautiful. And actually, we have in Australia too, and it's beautiful to see that intersection globally. Also, your community, you can have different communities at different stages, right, in your life, and for different things. Like we have a community where we practice breath work and wellness, but we also have a community that for support. And so like, there's this exercise you can do, which is like, you can the round table, or you can call it your board of directors or whatever. But who are the people you need sitting at your table that are going to support you in different ways, right? There could be the person that's going to be giving you the hard truths, right? That's kind of like, maybe you shouldn't do that. That's me. There's the person that's the safe space that's going to be like, I'm here for you no matter what. That's Paul. There's going to be the person that's going to bounce a soundboard of ideas, right? I know my friend Earl in the UK is like that. There's going to be the person that's going to cheer you on and be like, you got this, and lift you up. And there's going to be everybody has a different way of supporting you, right? And those can all form this table for you. So if your life's an auditorium, the people who sit on the first row are going to rotate depending on what you're going through. Now, it doesn't mean that they leave the auditorium. Sometimes the first row people become now the third row people. But who's on the first row is who you need right now for the one stage in your life right now. And if you don't have, and that's the thing, that's the fallacy. We're taught that you see it all over the internet. Self-made, do it alone. But that's not true. We need everything you need. Mentors, you need people, peers that support you. You need understudies that look up to you, that also cheering you on. All that is part of our success and well-being and all of that. So I think I also want to just end with, community also requires you to put intention and work into the community, right? So everyone's always saying something's like, oh, I feel alone. I wish I had more community. Well, are you also going out there and helping other people? Are you also giving value to other people that it's reciprocal, not the takers, but the people who also give to you back? Are you also putting yourself out there? Because it's a two-way street, and it requires you to give and you to receive, but that's what's beautiful. But it does require intentionality. As Paul was mentioning, his grandparents had people every day circling his house. That was intentional. That was not like they intentionally created community.
Okay. So I met you last year during a
Yes.
period of uncertainty, not just for me, but
Well,
for a group of people. And I know the critical role you played working with a lot of people. How was that experience like, working with different people during such a period?
that was a really heavy time because, so for context, I'm not sure if the listeners know what happened last year. Last year, USAID, rest in peace, died, right? So it was, what's the right word? Disassembled? I don't know. It was taken apart.
Destroyed, dismantled.
Dismantled. There we go. So last January, but it wasn't just USAID. So I want to give this story because it wasn't just USAID. So USAID was one part of it, but there was a lot of things dismantled. Grant programs, programs for minorities, program for refugees, everything diversity, equity, and inclusion. A lot of science was defunded.
Health science, environmental science.
It was a lot. It was a whole system. So USAID was one part of the system because, it had the humanitarian arm, but everything that had to do with supporting people of color, minorities, things that would be advancing science, things that would be, as we would define, meaningful work, dismantled. So even though we had left USAID 5 years prior, we were also deeply affected because all of our work, even though we had corporate, government, we had universities, everything. And because we're two minorities working on inclusion and belonging and everything like that, we got everything cut too. We got 90% of our stuff cut that we had spent 6 months doing. And more than that, this is where I think the community conversation comes in. Our whole network was dismantled. You're talking about 30 years of establishing a network, or 20 years, right, of all these professionals. And all of a sudden, that network and that stability, that thing that we had worked so hard to create a name for ourselves, dismantled. So we had gone through that as well. We were sitting, I remember this is how it connects to last year, because we were sitting there saying, well, we have two options here. We either give in and we say they win. And Paul and I try to get a job and I can do environmental, social safeguards for a company, can go do economics for a company, or do we rise up to what's happening? And we decided to rise up. So we went on news. We were on CNN, on Reuters, and we were trying to bring awareness. But you're on this podcast. I think one of the biggest lessons I think of last year is that we didn't spend enough time educating the entire public on what all the great work we were all doing in all these sectors.
In an interesting way. In an interesting and tragic way, it's actually a very parallel story to your dad.
Yes.
Right? Like there was all of this wonderful benefit that was being provided and on multiple levels worldwide. And I don't mean just that one agency, just in general. And then because always those pieces had been so poor about making their value known, when it came time for cuts, they were the first ones.
Yeah,
on the
we
block,
would make
right?
our value known to just the funders, but not to the public. And so we were trying to help the public understand why this was happening, we need to try to fight it, right? When we saw that was, it was great awareness, but it was still going to happen, we're like, what can we do? Well, we're like, we can help people transition because we had transitioned, right? This is again helping the person in the chapter behind you. We're like, we know that there are opportunities outside. We know how to translate the value outside of that agency to the rest of the world. And we also knew from understanding the new how AI readers work with your stuff, how that worked it just happened to be coincidence. I believe in synchronicity. I don't think it was coincidence. I think over the years, we had been learning stuff that we knew would go help people during this time. And I didn't know why. We were like, why are we helping these AI software people, help them, create less bias? And then when that moment, we're like, wow, it all came together. And so during that moment, we had the opportunity to help a lot of different countries. Actually, we traveled to 15 countries and helping two things. One is process the grief because you're losing an identity that you have been tied on, right? And there's a lot of grief in that, grief of losing your network, your identity, feeling everything being stripped away from you. It's being like a refugee again, right? And so it's one part is that, the part of you're now a refugee in the career world. And then the second part is, okay, now that I'm in this status and in this place, how do I position my value and communicate that so I can continue doing the good work? Because now to tie to your question, how was that experience? It was so heavy because everywhere we went, there was so much grief. And the way it was handled was so inhumane. I think that's the word, sorry. It was like people's insurance was being cut one moment to the next. People were giving different dates. People were not treated like humans. And when it's so inhumane like that, the amount of grief, we all loved our work. We all put our hearts and souls, and everyone put more hours than they were paid. And then to have that suffering, that inhumanity. So that part was really heavy. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say what's really interesting though is
At the same time.
that was an encapsulation, right? It was a very intense and extreme kind of a situation, but it's an example of something that we see entrepreneurs struggle with, an example that we see people in social enterprise and nonprofits, and even and certainly in even in the business and corporate world, that idea of your image and your concept of self and of value and self-worth is so tied to your position, your title, and that sort of thing. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why I really like how you started this podcast of tell me about you before all of this, right?
Yeah.
In the end, we've always been people who are looking for community, looking for ways to find people, looking for ways to help people, and basically trying to make the world a better place. That's who we've always been. That's what we've always done. That's what we're always going to do, regardless of our education and who we're, where we're working and all of that. And a big piece of our work is helping everybody see that that's true for you too, right? Anybody out there listening, that's true for you too.
Exactly. Exactly. And everyone in the experience are people who give back, are people who do meaningful work. And it's just help. I think in that experience it was heavy because we were carrying that grief for a lot of people. I actually went gray last year for that, but at the same time, holding that, we would have to like breathe after. But at the same time, it was so beautiful to see people reclaim their power again.
Yeah.
And I think that was the most beautiful part last year was moving people from the grief to reclaiming their power, because they would grieve it and then remember like through, because the way we do it, we don't do traditional things, right? Where we weren't going, give me your resume and let me write it over. I was like, we're not doing that. We need to first hear you and understand your values, understand your alignment. Then we're going to unpack all of your stories and your impact from your lens. Right. And then from there, create the resume, LinkedIn, because it's from your authentic power, your authentic perspective, your impact that you're already having and how it translates to any sphere. Right. So that's why it would take so long, right? Where they weren't like, other companies where I know we're doing like, oh, let me just edit your thing. I'm like, how is that serving the person? The person needs to understand they'll apply, but they haven't gone through the I have power, I have impact, I have value. Those sessions were so special, right? Because then people would, I always say people released, if you cried, if you sighed, if you realized, oh my God, I have this thing. And I would tell everybody, even if you don't ever use that resume, it doesn't matter. You have a legacy document. Now you have something that it's your storyboard. This is your life. And now you can go in there and be like, I'm going to continue to do this meaningful work. Because every workshop we started, everyone would be like, help me translate this to corporate and I'm going to do something totally different. And I would be like, wait, let's go through the process and let's see if that's aligned with your values, maybe. But let's first unpack and then see how you feel at the end. And 9 out of 10 times they were going to do the same impact, just in a different space. But they needed to go through the process of other spaces existed, that other people would value what they brought, to this space in other places. And I think it was beautiful. And it was beautiful doing it across the world because guess what? We all shared that experience together. It didn't matter like what language and what country. It was beautiful to see that all of us, sad, tragic, but also beautiful for all of us to come together under this and help one another. And I think that's what's been beautiful too, because there would be people who I would see that had similar things and I would connect them and be like, oh, you can help. Even just last week when someone messaged and they're like, I got an interview for this. I'm like, oh, I know from the coaching 2 other people landed there. So contact them and they're going to help you. And they helped them. So we're still in community, even if that organization has been dismantled. It's remembering that we are all still together. And I know that all of us are continuing to do this great stuff and the space we have, but it was a lot. So that's why we're building. I think you mentioned our introduction. That's why we have your pitch, because we did give extra hours pro bono than we were paid for a certain amount, but we surpassed that by a lot and gave pro bono. And it was a lot of people whose job didn't pay for the services that we gave for free. But then it got to the point in November that we couldn't there was not enough hours a day to do any more pro bono. And I remember sitting there going, Paul, the demand is still there. The demand is still there even there today. And so like, how do we help the people that you can't do one-on-one? And that's why we're creating this. It's more than an app, because the app sounds like a tool. You know what I mean? App sounds like a tool. AI sounds like a tool. It's actually just using technology in a way that's going to feel human, that does what we do, but through a technology that's trained like us, that is the people who can't have that one-on-one will be able to do it through WhatsApp and through a way that feels human, that allows them to process the grief, understand their power, understand their value proposition, so that all of us can continue thriving.
And in particular, in any moments where you have to have what we call a high stakes conversation, right?
Because it can happen to you any second. You could be on the bus. You could be in an elevator, right? Like you can be anywhere, and you have to be able to know what's my blueprint, what's my value proposition, and use it at any time. So even the people who had the coaching, this will allow them remind them always, especially in challenging times, who they are and the power they've always had. Because we're always going to be going through challenges, right? And we don't know what the future holds, and the future's changing. And so we need to have something that's constantly helping us and reminding us of that. And I think that was the main takeaway of last year. We all have power. Things can change at any moment. And so it's even more important than ever to know what we bring to the table, so that we're always confident at any moment that even if someone takes away everything from us, how we perceive that, they haven't, because they haven't taken away our essence, and we can continue making a difference.
So let's talk about two important things you work on. And I think you've talked about your pitch, but let's look at Be.Act.Change. So you have Be.Act.Change and your pitch. What inspired you to work on these two things?
Here, Paul, I'll let you go first.
Ahead. You're the president of the company.
So a couple things. When we left, it wasn't leaving from a place. If you read my book, I have a book, Creating Your Limitless Life, with chasing the American dream crossed out. One of the first exercises I have in that book is doing a visioning obituary. And I know it sounds really dark, but the truth is that it allows you to understand, what's your impact today? All right, what's the impact I've had in the world today? But then it allows you to rewrite it and think about what's the impact I want to have in the future. And I think for me, it was one of the reasons why we exited and we started Be.Act.Change, was because when I did that exercise, I realized that scarcity mindset, it's kind of like with Paul's childhood and the fear, and it's a lot of what we're living today in the world. I felt that I needed to be part of that movement to change that. And that meant that I had to stretch myself into something completely unknown. I don't come from a family of entrepreneurs. They think it's crazy. They thought it was crazy when I was leaving my position.
They still do.
They still do. Yeah. And they were like, what are you doing? You have an amazing position. But I knew it. I intuitively knew. And honestly, I think it's all synchronicity. I'm very spiritual. I think I was meant to leave when I left, to then help the people I helped last year. And I think it all happened exactly how it was supposed to happen. But I knew that go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
I don't want to derail you.
Go.
No, I think one of the really important lessons that we have learned, and I say this because I know that this show is aimed at entrepreneurs, right?
Yes.
One of the things that we have learned through this enterprise of ours is that you can make money. You can earn a living doing something that matters to you, that makes the world a better place. You know what I mean? That there's a lot of assumptions that are really incorrect about, that in order to make money as an entrepreneur, I need to sacrifice my values. I need to be unethical. I have to be doing, I don't like doing this, but this is how I make money. The truth is that for us, our success has come with that alignment. The deeper that we have gone into aligning to who we are and what we believe in, and directing and service and directing our work in that direction, that's
what's led to more flow.
That's been
of resources.
Exactly. That's been the crux of success for us. And
it was fighting those beliefs, right? Because everyone even told us too, you can only make money by selling your soul, all these things, right? And I'm like, I have to believe that you can make money doing good, one. And the second, that I know that when I have more money, I give more money away and I give more resources away. So there has to be that flow. I know there has. And so I knew in the obituary that one, I wanted to be someone later in life, wanted to be part of this fear and scarcity movement, wanted to see more of a world of more social entrepreneurs. And then I also wanted to be a person that eventually, it's still, this is part of my long vision, that we could be a foundation that later gives money to to people, right? And that have these dreams. And so that's what led us to then we're like going to create Be.Act.Change. And at first, the name, everyone's like, change the name. It's too hard. No one's going to understand it. La, 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 la. And that's when you have to trust as an entrepreneur. I'm like, well, no one knows it now, but they will. They will know it. And I wanted, because I love the phrase by like Gandhi and everyone, the be the change. And what I wanted to, why I added the act in there is because you have to do the actions and you have to take the steps. You got to take the risks. And so for me, that was always what was missing in the be the change. So that's when we added act. So you have to be who you are. You have to live in alignment with your values, but you also have to take all the actions and the steps and the risks and the uncomfortable things. And you have to use your voice and you have to stand and you have to, you have to the one who brings community together. You have to take those steps, and each step leads to your vision. And that's what then changes your world and then the world around you and the world in general, right? And so that's when the Be.Act.Change came around. And the Be.Act.Change is what we do. That's exactly what we do, right? So we help people align with their values in alignment, take those steps, and those steps are going to differ, right? So we work, like last year, we worked with a lot with the career transition, but we also work a lot with social impact entrepreneurs. And even part of that last year was, do you want a career or do you want to start a business? Because we have both paths, right? And the social impact entrepreneurship, it still starts with the same values alignment piece, right? Everything starts with the same and the visioning. But then the steps, of course, are going to be a little different, right? One would be more resume career thing. This is going to be more your pitch deck, how you show your value proposition, your 2-pager, creating a business that flows with your natural flow. Like not everyone is going to flow to, we don't sell on Instagram, right? That's not our flow. Other people do. They can do the lead magnet, but you got to know, how does your energy flow? How does your design, your human design, right? That's very specific to you, and that's going to lead to the success of whatever you build, right? And so many of us are so into the noise. I got to copy with this person. A lot of the work is going like, what's natural for your growth? And for us, what was natural for our growth was going into different communities. So even with the book, I remember that with the book tour, people gave us all sorts of advice. And I remember we do breath work. And I said, Paul and I were like, you know what? It's natural for us to speak to students and to social impact entrepreneurs and to humanitarian spaces. And so we just started doing free talks at different places. And then that led to our book spreading and us doing talks at, 200 people, 200 people, 200 people. And then that's how our book grew organically. But again, we trusted, right? Our flow trusted that this was going to be our population and that it was going to be a lot of like international or refugee or first generation. And then a whole other population of medical doctors in the rural areas came about, which was not what we didn't know that would be a population, but that ended up being a population. But it's like following that, right? And so Be.Act.Change helps people understand who they are, their value proposition, helps unpack that, and then make it happen and keep it going. And that's how we summarize that. And then your pitch is just the technology side of it, right? It's like how that's why it's called your pitch. It's like taking everything that we do and like in your hands so that you have it, as Paul says, in the moments that matter. And those moments that matter can mean a visa interview. I'm talking about any moment that matters, right? An interview, a fellowship, a pitch. But you need to know, right? If you have a moment like my dad that can change your life in one instance, we want people to have that tool. And I think that tool, it didn't come till now because we needed to understand what worked. And I think that's what entrepreneurs sometimes try to rush the process. And we needed to work with 5,000 people to understand, what is it that people need? What is it that works and resonates? What is it that, you have to test and trial, right? And so in the beginning, it was more coaching, more consulting. You learn what feels good, what doesn't feel good. We've taken clients that not always have felt good because it wasn't fully value aligned. You learn how to read and trust your intuition. And I think until now, we're like, I always thought about the technology piece, but we wanted to wait until we knew the piece that would really move the needle. And I think in this last year is what's really taught us this is what will move it. And this is where we are now. I don't know, you want to add anything? No, we're good.
Okay, so we'll later on talk about your book, but I want us to look at this. Let's talk about mindset and the
Yes.
importance of having the right mindset, because it's something that keeps coming. I've talked to so many entrepreneurs from so many countries, from so many sectors, from so many fields. And at every conversation, the issue of mindset comes up. How important is mindset?
You want me to take it?
Man, well, you're
Yeah.
going to take it in a different direction than I am. So
Go
I want
first.
to say one thing. So one of the I don't know if it's mindset directly, but it's part of the mindset. One of the things that so we have the opportunity to work with a lot of, as Esther said, social entrepreneurs through different accelerator programs and things like that. One of the biggest things that we see is that all entrepreneurs don't believe that their story matters, that and your story is why you're doing this business, right? It's more than your technical capacity. It's even more than the product, right? When you're out there and you're pitching for venture capital, one of the things that we know for a fact is that venture capitalists invest more in the person than in the product itself, right? So your ability to understand your story, relate your story, and to use that as the motivation of why you're doing this business is absolutely essential, because that's what lets investors know that this is going to work because this means something to you, right? And so a big part of the mindset for me is the mindset that your story matters, right? Where this is coming from matters, right? So I'll let you go from there.
Yeah, I think, and you're absolutely correct. And I like to make everything practical, right? Because its mindset could feel abstract, right? And we hear a lot of words like emotional intelligence, mindset, and you hear, I even I'm part of this group called School of Mentors where you have billionaire millionaires, every week. And they talk about 90% is mindset. But let's do it practical terms. Okay. What does that mean? If 90% is that and 10% is still the action. So I do want to say that 10% is still the action. But what does that mean is that are you able to be vulnerable? Have you dealt with your shadows? So when we talk about mindset, like how do you create a mindset is have you dealt with your stuff? Okay, what does that mean? Okay, if you haven't dealt with the things that are holding you back or that you're struggling with or certain childhood things, that is going to show up in your business. So when people talk about having a good mindset is that you've done that work. Okay, so what does that mean? For example, why do people struggle with telling their story? Well, they're scared they're going to hurt someone. They're scared that people are going to feel that their story is not of one where they were homeless and this, so they're going to judge their story. They haven't taken the time to put those connections together of why it matters. I mean, I talk about this with my book. The how-to section of the book, like Paul and I wrote, it took us 6 weeks to write that. It was like, we knew it in the back of our mind. How do we sit with people to help them get away from societal norms and do that? But it took 18 months to write the story. And I kept on deleting parts. I was scared to write about what happened in USAID. I was scared to write about what happened with my daughter. I was scared to write about my background because I talk about the money part, which Paul brought up in his story about not having money. And in my house, in our culture, you don't talk about not having money to strangers because then you're putting shame on the family. So what was I afraid of? Hurting my parents. So the mindset work I had to do was remembering that this was bigger than them. And I had to sit them down and I said, you're not going to like the first part of my book. I know you're not. But guess what? This isn't for you guys. It's not a reflection of me being ungrateful to my childhood. It's not to embarrass you. It's nothing like that. It's that it's going to help a lot of people because no one talks about this. And it was uncomfortable. So that mindset is what is keeping you from being vulnerable, from maybe sharing a story, from posting something, we get a lot of pitches that talk about stories very general. They're like, imagine a world where blah, blah, or chronological. I suffered this, at 19, I had this at 25. And I'm like, I want you to tell me how you felt in that moment. And when that person struggles, they're like, I don't want to show emotion. Okay, that is the mindset thing you have to work on. Why are you uncomfortable? What makes you feel unsafe in your body when we're doing this, right? And so that is the work. Why are you uncomfortable by this? And also being confident. Like the story that I was sharing you with my dad. It doesn't matter. Like I meet now through this cool application board where I have investor meetings 3 times a week. I start with that story now. And I started with like, you want to know what I do? I have to tell you this in 2 minutes and then we can go into it. But then people understand it. And at first people will hesitate. Like that's the mindset shift I had that I'm like, you know what? I'm not wasting anyone's time by giving that 2 minute thing. I'm giving them context. But that's where that the mindset is that confidence. It's that I've done the healing. It's that I've dealt with the shadows of keeping me from posting or sharing things or getting on the phone or talking about my work or not upsetting. I remember even sharing my USAID stories. I was really worried about upsetting my team or my colleagues, And maybe it did upset them, but you have to be willing. That mindset is, this is bigger than them. Like, what is that service? What is that impact I want to have? So when we talk about mindset, is that your mind is you are 1,000% in the service and the change you want to make in this world. That you are so certain that people need this beyond anything else, that the rest of it, the other consequences that could happen along the way, which they can. So it's, that's like the price, the short-term price to do this longer impact that you want to make and that you are 1,000% in. If you're not 1,000% in, that's when that's why they say you have to have that in there. If not, it's not going to move.
I would add one thing to that. And it's really just to re-emphasize your point. So a few years ago when we were sort of just getting started, Esther had this mentor and business coach who all the time would say, how are you serving your audience? How are you serving your audience? And in the moment at that time, I think we didn't understand what that meant. Like it seemed like it was being told to us as a way of, this is how you make sales, right? That it was more like something superficial in a way. And, I have taught in an MBA program before, and you hear that all the time in the MBA. How are you serving your audience? You need to serve the audience. And it took us a while to get to the point really understanding that what we do is service. This is our superpower, and we do this to help people, to understand that your purpose is to make things better, to empower people, to somehow solve a problem that is holding people back somehow, and I think the more that you can internalize that what you are doing is solving a problem, that mindset, I think, will help a lot as people move forward in an entrepreneurial journey.
And even remembering, like when we were talking about the obituary exercise, right? I have people go even further, like it has to be detailed, right? So in that rewrite, what are the testimonials? What is that change that you're creating, right? And I remember thinking about, wow, people who didn't know what their value was, like, or even me as a teenager, I was helping people, but I thought, oh, that's just what I do. I didn't realize that it was actually a superpower. Like people who didn't know that they had value, they know it now and are doing all these amazing good things in the world, right? And I give them names in my head, right? Like from like 4 years. So when you're like doing stuff, you're like, this is for Maria, this is for right, Sebastian, this is for this person because they're coming and they're gonna hear it, and because of what I'm doing, they're gonna go then. That one change maker, because you help them, is going to go help 100 other people. And that's what moves us forward. That was like a way to say I was hoping to make it more practical for the listeners, right? It's not just, it's more than just a state of mind. It's actually like actively thinking about that impact and that service constantly and being 1,000% in to that.
Okay, so let's talk about your book. You mentioned it in your submission, but let's talk a lot more about your book. And I got mine last year. I actually got it August 2025. So thank you. Thank you for this, as well as the workbook. So there's also the workbook. Let's talk about the cover page. So you have here Creating Your Limitless Life, and then you have Chasing the American Dream. Those are crossed out. First of all, why this title?
Yes, I love that because it's totally intentional. Because the chasing the American dream is not just for the United States. It's a global phenomenon. right? And I think like, when we were traveling, we saw it worldwide. It's something we grew up with as, I grew up as a refugee, post an immigrant, and we saw it at different places. And we still see it, right? Where people are trying to chase this American dream. Now, the problem with the American dream, and actually Paul explains this better, is that it's very limiting. What do I mean by that? Why is it limiting? Because it's saying it has very set metrics on what defines success. And it's also defining only specific values. It's saying if you have a house and if the house has a fence and if your kids go to X school, or you have to have 2 kids, it has a very specific thing in the type of job you have, like a 9 to 5. And it's an image of a person in midlife that has this house, that has a certain amount of money and has a picket fence. And the thing is, growing up, I never wanted that. And I think that's why, and I felt very odd about it because it was something that, it was something growing up to be like, you need to go be a doctor and a lawyer. And it was like I was doing well in
Or an
school
engineer.
or an engineer.
The big
These are
three.
the 3 paths you can only take, Esther. And because you got to go buy your house and you have to get married by you're 25. And so it was like all these check marks.
I remember talking to colleagues in Ghana, and apparently in Ghana, there's a 4th one. You have to be a doctor, a lawyer, engineer, or a pilot, that you could be a pilot too. And that was okay.
Exactly. So that's what I'm saying. It's a worldwide phenomenon, right? It's like this checklist of things. And then every conversation you have at family, whether, you go, if you're at a church or on a Sunday or, your family gathering, whatever cultural thing you have, it's about how far are you on those check marks? And it's so limiting. You're not supporting the people how they need to be supported. You're not accounting for so many other dreams and possibilities. And honestly, I feel, because, I'm a brown person in this world, I feel that it's a very limiting and colonialism practice. Because for other people, like I'm telling you, I'm going to be very, I'm just going to go and say it. For people who are wealthy and white, they're not told these narratives. They're told that they're limitless, that they can explore so many paths, that they can create and they can invent, that they can delay marriage. Their conversations are about connection. Like, how can I connect you to an opportunity? How can I link you and support you? And Paul and I saw that dichotomy, as we started moving in different circles, the circles which actually connect you to people and expansion of ideas. And so my whole thing was, I need to put that on the cover because we, as a population, and my, I wanted, and my book is, for like people who are like us, right? That I want them to be expansive. You can create your limitless life. There's so many more opportunities other than those 4 things. You can invent, you can create. And when you actually bring it from your purpose, the sky is the limit. And I see it in my life. I decided not to do against all odds, against approval, against appreciation. I went against those paths. And I'm so glad I did because that opened possibilities, that opened this. And now that I've went against those paths, I see that there is a whole philosophy of people that believe the limitless life that have these doors open. And so we need to bring that to the rest of the world. We need to all be in this mindset that there's so many different paths, that path of American dream is here. Why not aim here? And why not make a difference at the same time? And, why not also change the narrative that you can make money and make a difference? And that's okay. And you can. And the more money that we create as people who care about the world, the more money that's going to flow into other people who care about the world. And so I put it in your face in the cover to be controversial because I believe in that. And I've seen that the people we've helped change that, it's almost like we've given them permission, then taken this and soared. Our best example is, do you want to share that example of a talk we gave?
I don't know.
In New Orleans.
Well, go ahead. I was going to say something.
Okay,
else,
so I'm going to give you one story. In New Orleans, we were giving a keynote on the book and on this, okay? The photographer there, she was the photographer. She's like taking pictures, whatever. And then she comes after and she's like, can I have a book too? And I was like, okay, we give her a book and everything. And then she reached out to us later and is like, I read the book and I did all the exercises. And she's like, and I realized I was limiting Like I was doing like the American Dream box, and she's like, you know what I've always wanted to do was, and she was like at the place, at the photography, she was dressed very plain and like professional clothes, the whole thing. And then she realized, I want to be a fashion model, and like a fashion model for good. Like she does runway shows that donate and for Ukraine, all those things. She went and 3 months went, changed her life, created the modeling, started doing that. And then like in a year, started doing all those fashion shows. And now she's like boomed, and she just needed the permission. And, but it was crazy. She was just listening to our thing in the background, but she heard the message. And, so that was exactly what we wanted to happen. And that's what happened. But go ahead.
No, I was going to say, it was interesting to hear you talk about it, because I think
it's also my life.
It is your life. But so,
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the reasons why the chasing the American dream is crossed out in the book is because because the American dream is a lie. The concept is beautiful.
That too. Yeah.
The concept is beautiful because the concept of the American dream is that in a situation of equity, that you are free to create success as you define it. That's what the American dream means, that in a situation of equity, you are free to create success as you define it through your work, right? And so that's why people equate the American dream with bootstrapping. I built myself up, right? That the America is a place where you can come with nothing and make something of yourself. Yeah. But the truth is, one, that equity is a lie, right? When we come as immigrants, we're not given equity, right? Yeah. We don't have the same resources. We're not given the same opportunities. We're not seen the same, right? And
add that race, add that everything else is
all of that. We like when we speak a different language. We speak a different language. We look different, and all of that matters. So equity is a lie, right? So that doesn't happen. We don't start on equal footing. And then the other piece is that what we have forgotten in the definition of the American dream is that it should be about success as you define it. But the truth is that in application, what has happened is exactly what Esther was explaining. It's about your salary, your education, your assets, and are you married and do you have children? Basically, that's the encapsulation of the American dream. So when Esther was saying the American dream is about sort of a mid-range kind of success, that may or may not be your definition of success at all. And so we've worked with so many people who have achieved those metrics of the American dream and are just miserable because they worked their whole life to get to this, and then they look around and they're like, man, this isn't what I wanted.
No, I did it for validation, not for me.
Exactly.
Well, we always say, if it happens to be that those are the criteria that is value aligned in yours, amazing, right? Yeah. Then that's great. But it allows you to think beyond that, even beyond those metrics, even if it is true that you wanted them. There's still an impact and a legacy piece you want to leave. And what is that for you? And what does that look like? And how is it that you want to make people feel? It's very based on these external, these specific things rather than what you bring as a person.
Man, all of that and just the cover of the book.
That's
just the cover.
Oh yes, that's just in the cover. So where can people get copies of your book?
Yeah, so it's on Amazon. It's on Barnes and Nobles. It's also on there's all these apps that you can download it on, different library apps. But let's say you're in a country, which has happened to us, that you cannot download it from these type of websites, whether it's Barnes and Nobles or Amazon, or it somehow doesn't translate to your different place. Then you could just email us and we'll send you the PDF. You can send us a message on Instagram or through LinkedIn and we'll send you the PDF copy.
And also, not to be forgotten, for those who love audiobooks, it's on Audible, and Esther reads the whole book.
Yeah.
So, which is really, really nice. I think it's amazing when authors are the voice of their book.
Oh, that was really rough for me too, because I can't pronounce a lot of words in English, and I had to be like 10 times saying it over. But yeah, so it's on Audible. I know Audible is available in most countries, but again, if there's ever an issue, we can send you the PDF copy. Not a problem. Just message us and we'll send you a complimentary.
Okay, so we are just about wrapping up, but you've been on this journey for quite some time, and like any journey, there's been a lot of lessons you've picked up. I want us to spend some time talking about the key lessons you've picked up so far on this journey.
Man, I will tell you, I'm going to answer your question a little bit differently. I will tell
Okay.
you the lessons that I am still working on, because I also don't want, I don't want you to, I don't want you, I don't want your audience to think that we're here as images of perfection in some way, you know? Like when we talk about all of these things, when like that whole lesson about learning how to be of service, that was a hard lesson for us to learn, you know what I mean? And we've had ups and downs in our business and all of that. So for me, it's a personal lesson that applies to everything, especially in business. I would say I'm still working on not caring what other people think. It's a big lesson. You know, there's one part that is very certain of the value that we bring and the work that we do. And then there's a part of me that still struggles with being sort of out there and visible and vocal and things like that, that I think would help our business, but I still struggle with that. So, and I think that the more that you can free yourself from the weight of others' opinions, the stronger you will be. And I've seen it in my life, because I'm not saying that I have made zero progress, but I also see that that's a place where I have growth still to do.
And I would add to that. I love that Paul said that, because what we overcome, we're always going to keep overcoming, right? And so that's part of one of the things in the workbook. It's always going to be something, and like I still have a long way. Like even though we've had successes, along the way, like I think there's still a long way of so many more things I want to create that but I know it's a 20, 30-year journey. And I think that's the one thing, is always patience, is always reminding myself there's still 30, 40 years left in this. So it doesn't all have to happen now. I think also last year, when we lost everything in the beginning of the year and then we recovered, and we came last year with full on service. That was amazing. It was one of the lowest points for us last February, March, for all of us worldwide. But last November, one of our highest points, because we felt that the work we did mattered. And then we decided after that opportunities, we would filter that way from now on. Like, because I think in the beginning, when you're starting, a business, you take more things to try to test, right? And then we took on more things that sometimes weren't in full alignment. And I think after last year, we're like only in alignment now, because that we want to keep that feeling. But I think a lot of lessons. We have lost friends, because sometimes, when you outgrow, right? And I think sometimes, like, it's not even like you get into a fight or anything. They just kind of stop communicating because they're not in the same space as you, and that there's a grieving time for that. And then right, there's grieving time for that. There's also grieving time with your family at first, when they don't understand what you're doing. So I think one of the lessons is being patient with people and having empathy, because in the beginning it could feel very hurtful when you're starting something and people don't support you. And I think constantly having the lens of empathy, of being like, they might come around later, is really important, because I think some people have taken like 4 years to come around to us. And then when they come around, it's beautiful. They come around, they're like, I'm ready to work. And they realize it had nothing to do with you. It was that by you reflecting something, it showed a wound that they had. And I think having that empathy that is not necessarily about you has been, for me, I'm very, very emotional about people. So that it's going to hurt me more than other things, right? And so that's one of the lessons with that. I think the other thing is trusting. So last year I had to do a lot of trust, of like, we will survive, we will keep Be.Act.Change. I don't know how, and I don't have all the answers yet, but it will come. And I think even this year, when we started the tech process, I'm like, I don't know how it's going to go, but I know this is the way to go. And we trust that we're going to figure it out. And it's what Paul says, like being more risky, less afraid. We did a fundraiser this year, and I sent it out through email and through WhatsApp, and I felt myself cringe asking people to help with the app. But that's really important when you're doing technology, because you need to have a friend and family raise round. But culturally, you don't ask people for money. So how do you handle that? One of the lessons is, again, remembering that things are bigger than us. So it's the same struggle, right? I'm still, just like with the book, that I struggle to write about the money. I still struggle to ask people for money. Like you said, we're always going through that. But remembering that that's how these things work. They work in collaboration. That's the expansion. They work in collaboration with other people's money. But that's an expansion that we're going through right now. So one of the lessons is that's the lessons we've been through, is allowing ourselves to expand, but also at the rate that you're meant to expand. Because, when I started the business, I wanted to do TEDx right away. And then I stopped and I said, I'm not ready. Like, this needs to happen 5 years from now when I have a really solid message. And then it's happening this year. And I feel like this is the right timing for it. And I know that everything else, like, we know that we want a bigger platform, social media, but I know that that's going to be a couple years from now when we've done more of that inner work of being more public. And so everything has its. And so I think one of the lessons is not rushing things, is being patient, being of service, allowing that expansion to happen at the pace it needs to happen. And it will happen for you, and it'll happen at the time when you're ready for it. And I think that's true. I think it's right. I think TEDx is not until now that we're ready.
Yeah.
The book was when we were ready. And I think the tech is building at the pace it needs to happen as we're ready.
There's the divine timing.
There's a divine, and so I think that's one of the biggest lessons I can tell anyone here, because you want things so quickly, and you need to sometimes just allow things to happen. Like, we know that we will later have more revenue, and it's going to happen later, like, it's just like, it's like the amount that we want. But right now it's about the expansion. Right now we're like building this technology, and we've slowed down on revenue this year, but it's been intentional because I'm like, I know we need this to then be able to skyrocket. And so trusting that everything has its time and place, and everyone that you see that is super successful on social media, that's 10, 15 years down the line. And I think that's a remembrance too. Like Mel Robbins started 5 years. She has a book that none of us even know about. And then 10 years later is when she did her TEDx. And then that's when she grew. So what we see now is 20, 30 years in the making, right? And when we see Jay Shetty, when we see all these big people, when we see all these big platforms, they've been around for a long time. And so they've gone through these processes. And so remembering that what you see there is like a lot, they've already done all those steps. And then we can't rush it. There's no express route. We got to take those steps at the pace it needs to happen as well for us.
So the only one thing that I would add, only because Esther mentioned it, we didn't get too much of a chance to talk about things like leadership and things of that variety. But one of the big things that I think goes with the lessons that we've learned that applies to leadership as well is that empathy is strength. It's one of the things that there's so much talk about the opposite, right? That it's about productivity and expectations and, all of these things. And the truth is that being able to, I mean, we talk a lot about emotional intelligence and understanding basically the perspectives, the feelings, the values of other people, being able to incorporate that into your leadership.
And that starts with you first.
It starts with you have to know with the self-awareness and all of that, right? So I think it's one of the things that I don't think that we ever questioned it in ourselves, but I think that we were often questioned as to why we were this way. And, wouldn't we be better off if we were much harder and more disconnected from people and things like that? And the truth is that empathy is strength, and kindness is a superpower,
And being who you are. Everybody around us now is positive. It's all about meaningful work, everything that. So that's the biggest lesson, is that anything you visualize that you want, you can create for yourself. You have to take the actions and the steps, but it is possible.
It is possible. It is possible. I like that. It is possible. So before I sign off, what will be your last words to my audience before I sign off?
If you have an idea and you have an impact in the world that you want to make, go after it. Like, do it. Like, you have this voice in your head. It's kind of what we say in the back of the book, right? If you have this voice in your head, it's telling you something because that's what's meant for you. So don't ignore it. And don't worry about that you need to have it all figured out right now. Just start taking those little steps. Grab the book, grab the workbook, start doing those exercises and start bringing it out to the world. And there's not one path that's right. You could be building as you're working full time. You could work part-time while you build. It could take you 5 years to build something. Like, it's your process, your timeline. What matters is that you're building the legacy you want to build. It is possible. Anything that you want, it's in any vision you have, whether it's like changing the community you're around, or, being around positive people. That's what we wanted. Or maybe it's about having more impact. You can create it. Maybe it's about, I don't know, anything. Just it's there for you. And you can have it, and you can change your life drastically in 5 years, right? Don't think just of 1 year. Think 5. Think about what you want that to be, and go after it. Go create it.
And to know that that whole path starts with tiny steps. Like the scary thing, the reason why people often quit is because they see something so far, so big, so far in the future and feel like that distance from A to B is really, is just
Yeah.
that they're incapable of it, you know? And so what I would want people to know is, one, we've had the opportunity to speak to thousands and thousands of people. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that every single person has a beauty, a uniqueness, and a value in this world. So if anything, like I want you to, the one tiny step that I want you to take is tomorrow when you get up in the morning and you brush your teeth, as you're looking in the mirror, just mentally say to yourself, I'm a light in this world. And get into that tiny habit every day. As you're brushing your teeth, you look at yourself in the mirror, and I don't like to say things like that out loud, but I want you to think it and to look yourself in
I
the
say it
eye.
out loud.
I know Esther does, but to look yourself in the eye and say, I am a light in this world. I am a light in this world.
Yeah.
I am a light in this world. Right?
And you can do it. I will close that in November. We just, because of the pro bono, we had an idea that we're like, we need to make this technology. And we had no idea what it would look like. To now it's May and we know exactly what it's going to look like. But it was just the intention. We just set the intention in November. And when you set the intention and you set the energy, then the effort flows to it and the answers will come. But you don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to have that impact and that service and that you want to do something and it will come to you. So just take that small step of like, I'm going to do it and I'm going to create this and do it. The more of us that do it, I think not just the faster, but like the more that we will together change the world from fear to scarcity to abundance and growth. And it requires all of us to do that together.
Thank you. So we can all create a limitless life.
Yes.
And there's one thing here we always forget. On your terms. We always leave that out.
Exactly.
So we create on our terms. So thank you, Dr. Esther and Dr. Paul, for sharing this rich experience with us today on the Entrepreneur Speaks podcast. It's been so insightful, and I know my listeners and everyone out there is going to pick a lot of nuggets and apply this in their life. Thank you so much, and we wish you the very best.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So this has been another inspiring episode of the Entrepreneur Speaks podcast. I'll come your way next time with another episode. I remain your host, Kofi Anyemedu. As always, do take good care of yourself and let's continue to keep hope alive. Cheers.
Dreams light up the sky tonight. Builders of tomorrow shining bright. From every land they find their beat. Yeah, it's the Entrepreneur Speaks.